Here we are.
Okay. Hello again.
Welcome back. It's still working. I always get a tiny bit nervous sometimes that when you do go live, that something will go wrong in the interim.
Yeah, it's nearly like every Zoom call where you just have to go, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
There's the awkward silence of people talking over each other for a while, and then everyone's normal.
Yeah, I was working off one screen for a while. Sorry, everyone's coming. There's people entering the room now. So hello, everybody. Don't worry. We're going to start in a moment. So this is just the weird pre-talk before we get started.
Yeah.
But like you were saying there about is your mute button on. My second screen broke down a while ago, and I was waiting a little while to get a replacement. But whenever I was doing a presentation, I couldn't see any of the people anymore, so you'd have to constantly go, can you stick on your mic, can you stick on your mic, can you stick on your mic? So yeah, I'm gonna have to get a t-shirt with it written on it.
I think most people are the same.
Yeah, being heard. So here we go. So it's 12:59. We're going to kick off now in the next couple of moments. So come here, a little bit of housekeeping. It's brilliant to have you here, Niall, and thank you for joining us. So I'm going to introduce you to everybody now. Yeah, I'll introduce you to everybody now in a moment as they're all getting settled. But look, a tiny bit of housekeeping, just so for anyone who hasn't been here before, guys, welcome. It's our Thursday Careers webinar again, so thank you so much for coming. A quick one for anyone who's new to these and hasn't been here before. We have Niall Maher here with us today, but we have the hour allocated, right? So we always try and stick timely to these. So close your browsers and get stuck in and commit to it so that you can engage in the Q&A as well. So we're going to have a conversation about a couple of things, and then there is a Q&A that we'll always designate for the last kind of 15-20 minutes or so. But guys, this is a conversation, so the chat function's there. Please, anything that springs to mind or you want to ask us while we have Niall with us, feel welcome and involved. This webinar will be recorded. So for anyone who might need to duck out early for whatever reason, in the next couple of days, it will be pinned to the Slack channel on careers and events. So you can always review them there. And then just one last thing, look out for our Careers Crunch newsletter. It's on a Tuesday. We just started in the last month or so. It's a nice central place for you all to know about our events. And that's it. So Niall, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be here. And yeah, just to kind of double down on what you said, I love when people are interactive during these things. So it's not just like a talking to the void. So please ask all the questions you can. I'll appreciate it.
These guys aren't shy, so they're I'm sure they're just gearing up. So come here, for anyone who hasn't looked at your details fully in advance, Niall, there's a lot of ways that we could introduce you, but I guess the two most important ways are that you're CTO of Spark, but you're also the co-founder of the Kodu community.
Yes.
So we're going to cover.
I might as well introduce what they are and what the things are.
Yeah.
Spark is a twofold business. We both do product development for businesses, and we're also building our own internal products, software as a service businesses to help take the bias out of hiring. Yeah. So there is a good bit going on in Spark, and then Kodu was my own business previous to that, and I branched that out to the Kodu community because I wasn't happy with the workshops or the meetups in Dublin and how like the talks were being taught. So I changed the meetup standard a little bit by teaching long form 2 to 3 hour software workshops for people. And yeah, we usually drank a lot of beer, ate pizza back in the old days where, we could leave our house. And then because of COVID, that's become a YouTube channel and a Discord community as well, because it's the only way to stay in touch with people these days. But yeah, it's offered a new growth and a lot more people from abroad coming in and then getting involved in workshops and everything else now as well.
Wowzers. I have, for anyone, I'm gonna pop you them again, but if you'll see on the chat during the course of this, we're going to be putting up a couple of links to various different things that Niall will be steering us towards. But come here, Niall, and to give this some context, okay, this conversation, there's so many avenues that we could pursue here, but last week we ran a webinar which was entitled Unveiling the Hidden Jobs Market. And in that hour, what we were working through explaining to a lot of our attendees was that, the hidden jobs market isn't like a secret place that one day somebody comes up with a golden key and gives you access to. Really how you access it is just by changing behaviors. And the software development industry is a very unique industry in that the community is such a huge and like really it's the heartbeat of where things happen. But what can be hard, obviously, is understanding that and feeling comfortable with it. But I think your story will illustrate pretty well to anyone here as to, just how you can leverage the hidden jobs market or how you can leverage your community and really build your career by participation rather than jobs boards. So do you want to, maybe as a starting point, because we kind of hear your avenue into software technology?
Yeah, I might go off on tangents because it wasn't very orthodox. Originally, way back now, just over a decade ago now, I did a semester of computer science and dropped out because it didn't suit me. I didn't like the maths. I just wasn't mature enough really or ready for the industry. And I never thought about it again until about 7.5 years ago. So
what were you doing? 7.5 years is a long time to.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So I was during that time I had done lots of different jobs, from working in phone sales to door-to-door sales to even working with animal charities, up to kind of a job that I kept for the longest during all of this madness was working selling fine wines. And I was hired as the resident craft beer and whiskey expert for a company called Corkscrew, who would be one of the biggest wine companies in Dublin and Ireland. So I was working there for years. I really enjoyed it because, as you can imagine, lots of wine tastings, lots of fun. I was running a beer club, which meant that I could teach about beer and drink beer and get paid. So for a lot of people, they're like, why would you change?
Yeah. I couldn't have made this up.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it doesn't have the stereotype when I'm, advertising abroad as, the drunken Irishman. But I ran into some health issues, got rheumatoid arthritis, was struggling to walk, and realized I couldn't even lift wine boxes anymore to restock shelves and things. And it kind of forced my hand to look for something new. I needed to get something that would be comfortable enough to both support the medical bills that I was about to incur to try and solve things, and that worst case scenario, if it was going to be a permanent disability, that I'd be able to survive. So I did the one thing we all do is I Googled it. I just Googled what are the best jobs without a degree. And I top of the list, web development, web design, technology, because you can get into things without degrees. So I just started from that moment, really. Between customers, I had a laptop on the counter where I used to do a lot of research for like what wines were coming in, or if customers had some obscure things, because we dealt with a lot of people who would buy wine as investments. So there was it wasn't just a standard wine shop. And so I was just between customers learning on different sites, from Team Treehouse, Code Academy, YouTube, wherever I could get it, and just doing a miscellaneous amount of different things. Fast forward a few months, and I feel like I've learned enough to get a job, and now I don't know what to do. So that is, I think, the struggle that most people find, and probably find even at the end of their journey with the Code Institute, is what do I do now?
The first step. Yeah, the first step. It takes a lot of confidence, I think, too, because you're reimagining yourself. Like sometimes we will find that students struggle a bit with going, okay, well, these were my skills in my last job, and if I was walking into an interview to do that, I've got loads of examples, and, it's kind of a simple story to tell. But that can be harder when, you don't know how to use that story anymore. Exactly.
And the one thing you have in, say, the Code Institute that I didn't have was you have a network of developers around you. I knew nobody in technology, zero people. So I didn't even know if I had learned the right things or what I should be learning, or other than like things online. Like I was really blind to everything. So I went and got a couple of interviews, bombed them terribly. So just bombed them absolutely terribly, and came back and realized I wasn't as ready as I thought I was. But I didn't stop applying for jobs. I kept on applying for jobs, and I think I ran out of junior jobs. So we'll get to that in a second. So I then asked a few customers while they were drunk in my beer club, could I build their business websites?
So these are the wine customers who
yes.
you wine, then you go, you could probably do it a website. Maybe I'll build it.
So after years of selling people wines and whatever else, I kind of knew who was in what business. Were they small companies? Were they company owners? And I started asking the customers in the beer club after, they've had too much alcohol, perfect time to get a sale. I said, hey, would you like if I took a look at it and seen if I saw if I could improve it for you? And a lot of times they were like, yeah, this sounds great. So what I did then was using the network I had, so my direct network. And I think for everyone, they go, oh, that's great, you had a club. But we all have family and friends and people we know who have businesses, or even if we don't directly, you can ask those people, hey, do you know anyone that I could help?
Yeah.
And that's instantly like your immediate network that we all have. So I went to that and I just started saying, can I build you a website? So most of them were no's.
Technical network, This was just people you knew.
And these were businesses, non-technical people, nothing to do with, nobody had anything to do with tech. I got my first website, which is still up if you want to look at it, is City Spares. I think it's cityspares.ie. I was just done in Bootstrap. It's funny enough, like it's still up there now. A customer of mine that I just got very recently actually knew that website because they were partners with, or had dealt with bikes with that person before. And it was a very simple Bootstrap website, black and white, barbershop style.
It looks good. I'm looking at it right now.
Yes, so that was my very first website that I had built for getting out into the web development space. Then I just built a couple of more things and overcomplicated things. Like I wanted to learn some Angular JS at the time. So I built a website in Angular JS for an electrician. So his business site was a single page application. It was the flashiest thing you'd ever seen. That one isn't online, unfortunately, anymore. But like just going through that, because people were just like, hey, I don't know what we're doing. So you just do what you want. It'll be better because I have nothing. I was able to kind of demonstrate my ability in those portfolio sites. And what I was able to do then as well is I rang those or called those people afterwards and I said, hey, would you mind being a reference for me when I apply for jobs? And they were delighted because I think I charged them $500 a piece, which is still like a lot of people would do it for free. I just was bold and said, I want to get paid something. So it feels like a professional transaction. But they became my references, and that really boosted up and started changing how these interviews were going. Because what I was getting to in the interviews was I was getting into the interviews, failing a little less each time. And that's the way it was.
Failing
like, it
better.
was just it was fortitude because like I did about 50 interviews, which is like more than most people ever do nearly in their career. But I did about 50 interviews, and each time what I'd do is I'd stumble on something silly. I'd go away and I'd learn wherever I stumbled in depth.
Okay.
And then I would go back next time and I wouldn't trip up at that question. I'd trip up to something else.
Okay. Fine. just and then you're like, okay, I have to learn that now. So did you find the technical tests more difficult, or the kind of the competency based bit when you got talking to people more difficult? Or maybe it was a complete mix of both?
No, I found the talking, I think that kind of just comes down to my personal attitude as well. Like I am a very social person. I'd worked at face-to-face kind of wine sales for a long time.
Sure.
So where I was comfortable was speaking to people and telling a story. Whereas where I was uncomfortable was I had no tech people around me. I couldn't ask questions when I was stuck on the technical tests and just crying to myself on the keyboard saying, I hope this is right. Submit another tech test. It doesn't sound all that glorious, but it's the pain you go through for the first one. You just have to. And how I give myself an advantage. The number one feedback I was getting when I started getting good at interviews was, we like you, but you don't have any experience. Which is a line that drives us all bananas all the time. So I kind of went, and I noticed that like some people were taking my portfolio pieces as like real bits of work, and other people weren't. So what I did is I registered myself a business, and that'll be Web Apes, and I made a little logo and I put a website up, and I just put myself up as a business. Yes. So instead of being a guy who builds websites, I now am a business who supplies, for businesses. Yeah. And that's changed the narrative.
It does. And there's something about the credibility that people instantly assume once they see that it's like a business name, it's organized. That's, I suppose that's the difference, isn't it, in the turning point of a conversation, because you're sort of positioning yourself as, I don't mean an equal in, a lesser or more, but in terms of kind of professionals standing, you're now an employee of a business and you're a web developer, and that just has instant credibility. Whereas in actuality, the situation was exactly the same as it had been before, just presented differently.
Exactly. And the narrative changed because instead of like saying I don't have experience, the question became like, well, why do you not want to run your own business anymore? And that was an easier answer, because I just said, I don't like chasing customers and marketing and all the financial parts to go around, and I'm not getting big enough projects, so I don't feel like I'm learning enough. I think that's something to always keep in your mind, is especially at a junior position, to just say you're like hyper focused on growth and learning. So I always kind of spoke that up in the things. It was always about like, I want to take on bigger challenges so that maybe a decade down the road, I'll be able to win bigger business with bigger knowledge. And that really helped me get through things then.
Yeah, just on that, because I know that this is something, because I talk to a lot of students coming out, like many of them, obviously they'll come out of Code Institute with a portfolio. Many of them may not have fully decided yet exactly what avenue they want to go. And like that might be doing sort of projects themselves or projects for a family member, but really easily they could put together, I mean, like I'm right in saying like setting up a company is a very simple thing to do to make it kind of legal. Like anyone can make a logo online. Like this whole investment could be like a couple of £100, but immediately you've replicated what you did. So brilliant for anyone who's kind of got a big portfolio and wants to just kind of tie it up together. That's what you have to do. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Wow.
And I think that'll be very useful, especially for anyone that's slightly older and trying to like sidestep, because a lot of people kind of, there is some ageism in the industry that people have to face, and like it's tough. But like I know that from seeing, I haven't faced it myself because I'm not old enough, I guess. But like I've seen very talented people the other side, and that's not to be negative about it. It's just because if you address the elephant in the room, at least then you can say, okay, how do I stop that from becoming part of the conversation, or even as part of the story and the narrative? And this is all about, everything I kind of talk about is usually about controlling the narrative and controlling the story when you get into these situations.
Yeah, and it's a really good point, and there's two things that kind of spin off from that. And one is that I get asked a lot of questions, and very often in these webinars as well, around ageism, and is it a really big problem or is it not? And ageism can work in loads of ways. You can also on a certain side be considered way too young and green, and they're not going to say that to you, but might be, depending on what kind of profile they're looking for. When it's at the other end of the spectrum, sometimes people may worry about their ability to train you into what they want, because you may have very fixed ideas from a previous industry or whatever. And that's the reason why, it's not the age number, it's just the learning and how quickly you can contribute and whether you can do it on their site. But very interesting. We had Olivia Galvin, a careers coach, with us here before, I think it was before Christmas, it was early or in January or something. And somebody asked her about ageism, and she just said, and it was brilliant feedback and really good advice. She said, look, in every single interview process that every single person on this call and all of us have when we go into a recruitment process, is that there's something about us that we know better than them, and that we're worried they'll find out, or that we perceive as a weakness. And just like you said there, Niall, like managing the narrative can just obliviate that altogether and put you completely back in the driving seat. And I think
I'll share some tips a little later on how I, like in the interview itself, how I usually control the interview, because I think that's also helped. I do a few things that a lot of people never do.
Interesting.
I'm very unorthodox when it comes to an actual interview as well. To just I don't know if I meant to swear, but definitely fuck shit up when I go into an interview. I definitely don't do it in the traditional way. I know I want to make sure I make an impact, and I've gone out my way to set that up before I even enter the room.
Brilliant. Well, it's good to have a technique, and it's also really good to prepare. And another thing that we spoke about last time as well was, just not being a slave to the jobs boards, doing a little bit of work and approaching companies that, kind of suit your narrative. And, that maybe that's not for today because we want to hear your story while you're here, but, just for the guys listening to kind of fill it in. There's already loads of questions coming in. And we may have passed this by, but Tom wanted to know what kind of jobs you were applying for. Was it just regular, like junior dev roles that you'd see online?
Yeah. So at the start, it was every junior job I could find. Okay, I was just applying for it, just going for everything. Yeah. And believe it or not, I actually just ran out of junior jobs to apply for. And that's also why I would tell people to slow down a little bit and space out their applications to things. And I know that's a very hard thing to do when you just want a job. But what I realized I was doing very early on that kind of caught up with me very fast is I sent out like my CV to nearly every company I could find that had junior things open. Okay. And it wasn't tailored for those companies. So later on, when I started realizing
you only get one shot, like, to send it in.
Yeah, within like 6 months anyway, because like they have your CV on record. So if you drastically change your CV as well, they're not going to notice because they're all going to have you on file as like, no, not a suitable candidate. We already looked at them. So a little later on, what I started doing was small tweaks, like depending on the role that I was applying for, like matching and I have a whole CV guide. I might share it with you afterwards because I know a lot of the recruiters here in Dublin actually use my template to give out to potential people because I helped with the local recruiters on writing a CV template for businesses.
Wow. Yeah.
So I'll share that with you after. I totally forgot about it until I started talking about it now. But like having a tailored like skills and title to your CV for the job you're applying at least means you read the description of the job and little details to say why you'd be good for this position. Because a lot of people just have like, here are all of my skills. And it's very hard to just mentally parse as you're going through when you have, and especially like when you get to the end of Code Institute, you have a very comprehensive skill set. But not all of your skills will apply for every job. It might be worth mentioning that you have these additional skills, but what you want to highlight are the skills they are asking for that you do have. That's really useful for a lot of people that they miss out on. They just kind of have this boilerplate CV, their master CV that goes boom everywhere. So when I started doing that, I'd kind of run out of jobs. I know this is a really long-winded answer, Tom. So when I run out of junior jobs and I went then to mid-level positions, believe it or not, and I got some horrible feedback. In a couple of them. Like I remember one company that just said like, we wouldn't consider you for a junior position. Like really harsh feedback.
That's really kind.
That was soul destroying. That was the only time I think during the whole process my ego got dented a little bit. But I did eventually get into a really big company called Amdocs, who are an Israeli company. That was an awesome job for me to get landed in originally. So like, even though I struggled, the job was fantastic because I like within my first year of development, I was flown over to Australia to work on a project. I was working with Israeli customers and I was working with Vodafone Italy, UK, and a lot of other companies. So like, even though it wasn't what I dreamed I wanted to do, I fell into this and it ended up being something really, just really like character building for me, because I think everything that I did there is still something that I'm doing right now. I still think about how they have these huge customers and how like, instead of doing like small websites and things, how they were taking on projects that were hundreds of millions.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting, they're just to pause there for 1 second, because one thing that I'm always saying to the students here is that, like, if you move through our diploma, and again, we're preaching to the converted, there's 100 students here who are investing time in listening to you and hearing about the the industry and, you know, thinking about their career whilst learning how to code. But it can be very hard, you know, if you know how to code, but you don't have no experience in what kind of jobs are out there and how to, you know, how to navigate your way through a recruitment process, you can waste a lot of time. And, you know, it can be everything that you learned through that might be valuable, but, you know, these guys can learn some of that now before they have to persevere out in the jobs market without understanding what awaits. So
hopefully you don't have to fail 50 interviews like me.
But you were failing so well. So
failing upwards. That's all you're trying to do.
And by the way, it is Amdocs. A couple of people have asked what company it is. It's Amdocs. Well done, Thomas.
Yeah.
So you started working with Amdocs in a development role or related to a development role. It was technical anyway.
Software engineer was my title.
Software engineer. Brilliant.
And baptism by fire. First week into the job, they asked me. They asked the whole team. So the team I was brought into was like a firefighting squad. So Amdocs does a lot of offshoring, and so things go wrong. Yeah. We'll put it politely. Things go wrong, and our job as this kind of small little elite team was to put out fires, basically. So my first week in the job, I was asked. Our team was asked, like, does anyone want to go to Australia to fix a problem between 100 developers? And I just, like, in the meeting was like, look, I'm really new. I'd love to do it, but, like, obviously I'm too new. And, like, after the call, they came up, they're like, no, you can go. And
because you were the only one who volunteered.
Yeah, but, like, I didn't realize. I was just being nice. And
cool. So off you went.
Yeah, a week later, I was in Australia for a month. So wow, okay. It was a bizarre, because like a month earlier, I was really struggling just to even like pay my bills or do anything, and all of a sudden I was given a company credit card and like sent on a business class flight to go solve problems with my new skills. It was like, for me, like overall, that's like the moment I felt like I was successful. You know, I'd cracked it. This is what it is. This is what I'd aimed for. It was completely life-changing for me.
Yeah. Wow. In the space of 4 weeks, isn't that just...
Yeah.
Incredible? Yeah. So when did Codoo Community come into all of this then?
Yeah, so I started at the end of... Now, like, I move rather fast between roles and things. I've noticed that, and I get bored very easily. I'm sure anyone can just tell from even looking at me kind of pacing around as I talk and everything that I'm not very like I can't focus for too long on the same problem over and over, or I couldn't. And I'm getting much better at it now because I really love what I do every day. But I got a call from actually one of my co-founders now, or one of the guys in Spark, who was at the time a recruiter, and I've kept a relationship with him all these years, and he said they're looking for a senior developer in Bank of America. It's a contract role. Would you be willing to try it? And my attitude was, look, I'm definitely not senior, but I'll go and do the interview to see what a senior developer is asked. Yeah. And I ended up getting that job, and which, like 9 months into my first job, I was now suddenly a senior developer.
Amazing. Yeah.
But just because I took the opportunity. You know, somebody called me and said, hey, do you want to do this interview? And I said, yeah, okay, let's look. I don't think I'm going to get it, but I'll do it just to see what they ask.
Yeah.
And from that time on, I was doing contracting and freelancing and a little bit of consulting for different businesses.
Yeah.
I was working through a business using my own name, but then I decided, again, kind of to go back to what I did originally with WebApes. Was I realized that freelancing was tough because I didn't have a brand. So then I built Codoo, which is Irish for coding, but it sounds cool like Nike, I think, or something like that.
Yeah,
so
and it has a father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went with that, and it just helped me attract bigger customers because it wasn't a one-man show. Even though behind the scenes, it was still me getting people to help me do these things, and it was still really a one-man show. The brand really helped me attract more people, and I wanted to get my name out there a little bit. And
Yeah.
I was also going to a lot of meetups and it wasn't happy with them. So that's when I just started to go to a community. I just made a new meetup in Dublin and asked that we work for some space, and they gave us free beer and a classroom. So we did that for like a year and a half teaching. Yeah.
And other coders would show up. There's actually Luca is here, and I think met you before. Apparently, you're one of the reasons why Luca started this course, because Luca had heard the story in City Spares. There's a lovely big smiley icon after that. So I don't know if you know Luca, but it's your second meetup.
That's funny.
That's a cool story. Thanks for sharing that, Luca. And then earlier comparisons was that you sound a bit like James Bond getting on your business class airplane and heading off for Australia.
It was amazing. There was a bar on the plane and everything. I'll never pay for a ticket like that stupid myself. So it was great. It was great to be sent that way.
So what a whirlwind. And so let's pause on the Cody community for a moment, because like I said, last week we talked a lot about the value and importance of a community. And, a community is reciprocal. You obviously give and you receive. So it's not the same process as like, here's my CV or I'm searching, but conversations are constantly happening. So can you maybe give us some insights as to your thoughts on how important this might be for somebody at early stages?
Yeah. You should build a network before you need it. Always.
Yes.
Always. Like, don't think I'll do this when I'm ready. Get into the conversations as quick as you can and have the network. Because I like to think of a network, and one of my favorite analogies about networking is to think of it as a vegetable garden. Okay. Whereas if you start picking from it too early, you'll never grow anything. Whereas if you care for that garden and take when things are ripe, you will actually have a garden that is self-sufficient for years to come, because you're picking at the right times. And you should be always putting back in a bit more than you're taking, so that the garden is always full and ripe to feed more. And that's why you have to be very strategic to a certain extent. And remember that this isn't a transaction. This is relationships. This is friendships that you're building. Even though we hear networking coined as like a business term, this is just friendships for adults. Okay? That's all it is. You just want to be a sincere person and make yourself available to people. Don't think of the professional tone that is inclined with networking. I think it often gets misinterpreted as something sleazy and salesy, when really it's all about building relationships. And then people want to help you because you have a relationship. You don't want to see one of your friends who has a good skill set not use their good skill set. So that's how these relationships turn into like professional opportunities. Yeah.
And it's where conversations begin and ideas are formed. And, when we talk about maybe jobs being created, jobs are just fulfilling an idea that somebody had that now they need people to do. So, if you're present at the conversation stage, those jobs never need filled, because people are there and contributing, and, it develops from there. And I love how you described it to gardening. I love gardening, but it's a lovely analogy, because if you kind of pillage your store, there's not going to be anything left, and you have to keep starting again and again and again. It never gets established. But if you're tending it and minding it and giving it what it needs, it just will always kind of return. But in terms of starting points, like, where do you think are good ways for somebody who might be maybe a bit nervous about this, or maybe not just nervous, but just going, there's like a zillion groups. Where do I start, and how do I manage my contributions so that I'm not exhausted from all these things?
Yeah. Well, if you're active in the Code Institute Slack community, you've already started. Like, that is like, even though it's not what business is, what you're doing is you're making a network of people who could potentially be business owners or bosses, or working with people who need help someday. Yeah. And by being in that community and helping out in that community, in your own communities, is really valuable. Just like, again, it's not going to pay off right now, but the amount of people that I've helped a few years ago that come to me now and say, hey, now we're actually ready to work with you. You know, we couldn't before, but now we really want to work with you. So like, that's where I would start immediately, is you have a network. And because of COVID, it's become a little bit easier for introverts, because you can join communities. I've given you the link for my own Discord, but like, that's the community I've started just as an online chat. And you don't even have to actually speak to somebody. You can just throw in some questions, say hello to people. I randomly just sit in the voice channel just to talk to random people whenever I'm bored. But like, that's just networking. It's not as complicated as, or as scary as people think. You don't overthink it. Like, it's not a job, nor should it become a job. It should be fun and enjoyable, because all you're doing is meeting interesting people, hopefully.
Yeah. And I think that like the term kind of community has sort of taken place of networking. Like, you're right. Like, to me, the idea of networking, when someone calls something a networking event, you know, we still call it that sometimes because we need to communicate what it is. But like, it's a very old-fashioned way of describing, you know, that awfulness of walking into some sort of conference and elbowing your way into conversations and sticking a name badge on and, you know, looking at the guest list and all that kind of, you know, it's so much easier now and more organic and fluid that all you need is a shared interest. That's it.
Yeah.
And actually, like you said, at the moment, I would have said that these things are much easier because, you know, in terms of the time you have to invest, it's not like you have to give a whole evening to trucking off down to, you know, a shared space somewhere, and you can just jump online for an hour. And if you can't stay for the whole time, you can jump back off. It's no big deal. But also, it's just easier to chat to people when, you know, it's a conversation about something that you're interested in.
Absolutely. And like especially when you go to a tech meetup or something like that, it's like you have a common talking point already. And I know it might be difficult to just like say hello to somebody, but do it, because you're never going to, if you leave a meetup without saying hello to somebody after going in alone, you'll feel miserable for the rest of the evening. I promise you, as somebody who's done it, and when we do get back into it, I'll have a big Kodu community event, and I hope a lot of people can attend. Because I kind of force people to work together to help solve problems during the workshops, which kind of breaks the ice. But like, that's not the normal way of doing things. So like, just speak to somebody. Like, it will eat away with you and your evening if you've gone in with the purpose of saying hello to people and you don't do it. So get some courage and do it. You'll never say, oh, damn, I wish I didn't speak to people. Like, it's very rare. Like, there's definitely people I spoke to that I'm going, wow, that person was crazy. I should not have spoken to them. But like, it's a story at the end of the day. Sorry.
I was just going to say, no, it's funny. Like, we gave an example of this last week as well, but the same thing was just so pertinent to what you just said there. And sometimes you can be really lucky in that, you know, a meetup or a community might give you like a really instant win, but again, bringing back the gardening thing, it'll keep growing forever. Like, you never lose your community. You always have it. And there was just a cool thing I shared on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago with this guy who just got a great new job as a developer, but his wife had put him on the phone to somebody who rang her, having met her 2 years ago at a meetup to do with a startup, wanting to know, was she free work-wise? And she said no, and handed over the phone. And he was like, oh, so that's it now, I have a new job. But it all came off the back of like this one meet. So people really remember those engagements. And I certainly know that I've rang people that I, you know, stuck out in my mind for, you know, different events that I would be involved with. That would be your first point of call of, do you know anyone, or I need someone for this. So long before these things hit the jobs market, which is a really practical step, you know, getting that practical first paid job that you need. So much of these conversations are going around in circles. Literally just pick one or two meetups, follow them, join in, like at home, log into a conversation that's happening somewhere, and pay attention to some of the people that are there. And it just grows from there. You can't force it. You just have to kind of do it.
Yeah. And a life hack, actually, just speaking of those kind of meetups that I found it way too late, and that a lot of people don't do, if you're struggling to get like that initial business and those initial portfolio pieces and those initial conversations to the relevant people, start going to entrepreneur meetups and start business meetups, because you'll find a lot of non-technical people who have great ideas, who are trying to get businesses off the ground. and suddenly you'll be one of a handful of people who actually know anything technical. And
you're the expert then.
Yeah, you're suddenly an expert because you're way above these business people in your expertise, and you can give some advice and free advice and just help people out. And that's something I learned later than I should have. But it's a really useful technique is just to be going to like startup mornings or like co-founder meetings and those kind of things where people are usually looking for help on things and they're asking. And even like I'm part of some business communities here in Dublin, and I'm one of the very few tech people in the communities. And it's still like blows my mind that I'm one of the only kind of active technical person along business owners, because it's where people should be. You can help people. You have a skill that they need.
Yeah, and it's just starting those conversations, which is the hard bit. There was a question there from Asher wondering about contributing around the CI. I presume that's Slack channels that they're wondering about. So there's lots of ways, you know, even on the most basic in the careers in general, there's lots of conversations. Also getting involved in the hackathons, like we run really regular hackathons where you're going to be, you know, they're brilliant contributions to your experience if you need examples when you're talking at interviews and, you know, working in teams rather than just, you know, on your own. So that's going to be really similar to what life is like. So even on a really basic level, those three places are where things happen a lot. So I would start from there. I think also coming to these webinars and linking in, like I always encourage everyone to, you know, stick up your LinkedIn profile, you know, link in with yourselves outside of the immediate network so that you can start seeing each other's activities. They're really basic first steps, and they're the ones that we kind of stick to here, just so that while you're in the CI community, that at least if you do them really well, if, you know, Slack and LinkedIn are really active, you'll find out so much more stuff afterwards. But, you know, getting to understand that the technical landscape is the most important bit, because it's, you know, it's a lot to take in when you're doing this at an interview for the first time.
Oh, you'll never, it's overwhelming. And like, no matter how many years you study for, you'll still have those days that you'll go, I'm not ready for this. I unfortunately still have them. It's, I have my bad days where I go, I'm not able for this.
Yeah.
What am I doing here? You know,
give me a beer.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone sees me on LinkedIn on Fridays, that's what I'm usually doing, is I'm streaming with a beer as I build things. So that's my normal habitat reactivated then. So yeah, it's definitely a case of just being active and out there, especially LinkedIn, although can be a little bit formal. By being a little bit yourself, I think, on there and showing a little bit of personality and what you're working on, is very easy to be heard, because there's so much straight, narrow, tie-wearing style posts, and you're hopefully making really cool, awesome projects that are going to be, you know, able to cut through that noise. And if not, at least it's there. You're at least findable. Because there's other platforms like Twitter that are just so much noise that it's impossible to kind of surface up. It's just difficult, and you don't know whether it's good noise or just like trendy noise. Yeah.
And, you know, and the thing that is why I recommend LinkedIn, particularly at the beginning, is that you just, it's so user friendly. Like, you can look at companies that you like the look of, you know, if you're following a blog or even a newspaper, like pick up the newspaper once a week on a Sunday. If that's, you know, if you have enough digital stuff happening, then it's all getting confusing. Look at the startups, you know, look who's getting investments, look who's got a new owner, look who's got bought out. You know, all of these places are moving and hiring, and just start following them and start linking in with some of the CTOs and the technical managers and the developers in those.
Connect with me, you know.
Yeah.
I'm open. I'm always open, especially with developers. I love connecting with developers because most of my content is based around the technology business and actually building things. Yeah. So most of my profile is not suitable for non-technical people. So definitely jump in and connect with me as well.
You're going to get a million addresses now. I'm just sticking your address, and I've done it a couple of times, but I've stuck it in there again now. So we'll have a competition and see who gets the most new connections after this one. So come here. There's a couple of questions there that have come in, which will be really nice, kind of practical feedback from people. So one of them was from Pierre, wondering if you have any opinions on what type of project you would consider as crucial to have in your portfolio.
Yes, I actually I'm very strongly opinionated on this.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
Which most people like thread around this and say,
Good question,
what is
Peter.
it?
Yeah.
I would say something like an e-commerce app or like a t-shirt store. Well, like if you're going for front end jobs, at least we have like the things set up on the front end that you can display products and show things and grab data from somewhere, like show those crucial skills. If you're a backend developer and focusing on that area, you'll still need a website, but you're focused on having those transactions done and saving those things because it's a real project, it's a real tangible. That might not be suitable when you first get into the job market. And I know, like, because I know I wasn't doing that when I was applying for jobs originally. I couldn't do that when I was applying for jobs originally.
Yeah.
But what it does is it gives you a roadmap of the things you should learn, what things you do not know yet. And you'll be able to like learn around what you're trying to build, because you'll often get into like a tutorial hell of like copying and pasting from videos. You think you're making progress, but until you have a big project in mind, that's when you'll really learn if you're ready.
Yeah. Yeah. So being able to demonstrate the different stages, and I suppose an e-commerce application, you reckon, is a really good way of doing that?
Yeah, front end, back end, or full stack. I think there's something, it's very visual. And if you're a backend developer, there's some complex things because you're managing cart state, you're managing payments. Usually that's managed with Stripe anyway, so you don't have to do too much. But you might be able to handle like the history of the orders, maybe even print a PDF. There's so much you can go with there. And the other side of things is back to real experiences. You could link this to something like Printful, which is like a print-on-demand service, and actually have a real shop. Where you can take payments and they send your products to people for you, so you never even have to have inventory. So like it's a really fun and exciting project then, because you're taking your skills and building a real business.
Yeah, and then it's a brilliant way to discuss it as well when you're in that interview environment and you can tell the whole story of it.
Yeah. It is definitely just about getting problem solving. I'm not expecting most people to know how to do that straight away. That's like, it would be too difficult, but it's about having something to lean towards as you're applying and going forward, and you feel like you're not getting anywhere. Focus on that end goal of being able to build that application, because it'll just also educate your learning, because we all go off on so many tangents during the learning that it's hard to get back on track or know if we're learning right.
Exactly. And then, I suppose your experience would have been more challenging in many ways, because you didn't have the supports there. For all of us doing the program here, there are places you can go that will sort of protect you, because that's a really important part of it. There's a really good question here from Fatima that I'd love to ask, and Fatima wanted to know, thanks for the question, Fatima. Fatima was wondering, did you get training and support when you first joined as a junior developer or intern, and whatever way you started? And also, are you expected to kind of be on your own at work? So basically, did you experience good supports when you went out into industry?
Great question. For me personally, none, and it was terrifying. Okay, and this is like I'll kind of explain what happened to me, but what would I expect from a good junior job would be support and things. Like I know companies like CarTrawler or that have great systems where you're in a classroom for nearly 6 months before you even go anywhere. You know, a lot of companies are getting really good at this. Some companies, and it's just be careful, depends where you're at as well, will not give you the support when you start. And it's something you can ask in the interview as well. And I was just going to say, the interview process is really revealing, right? And I know when you're trying to get your first role, you sort of feel like you just want to get that one, and then you can breathe a sigh of relief and get going properly. But you can figure that out a lot by even if you aren't directly saying, what training am I going to get? All you have to do is say, what do you expect out of this hire in the first 3 months? And if they're really struggling with trying to answer you, this hire mightn't be that well thought out, which means that the training might be a bit haphazard. So you should be able to ascertain a lot of that. But honestly, good training is not necessarily a reflection of like a big multinational or a small startup. It's the people that are going to be in your team. So just you're the immediate people that you would be working with. You should see what way they plan on managing this. Yeah, and ask the question. It's the only way to know. For me, like it was, and I said it earlier, it was baptism by fire. Like I was told, I was hired because I learned some React, before I started, and that was when React was version 0. So I was one of the first people kind of learning that. So they wanted to try it out. And when I was hired, they asked me to work on a reactive project in Australia. So reactive was another framework. So I went in the 2 weeks before I flew learning reactive. And then on the plane, when I was checking things, I realized I had actually learned the wrong framework. There was another framework called Reactive, which was for AC. Okay, they dropped an E. So
you know reactive.
So I know reactive and reactive now. That's how silly these JavaScript names have gotten. So I truly had no help and no clue, and I was too embarrassed to put my hand up and say that because I had felt like I had bluffed my way into a job. I constantly throw myself into the deep end of the pool on nearly everything I do. Usually I can swim. Sometimes you fail, but you have to expect that if you fail, like, where are you going to be? You're just going to be back to where you started. It's not like you usually can't go that much backwards unless you tell an incredible lie and end up in court.
Which we would not advise, by the way.
Yeah, definitely not legal advice.
But look, everyone's story is different, and we're all going to do things that you have to be comfortable with it, but you also, to do something new, like, have to be slightly out of your comfort zone. Otherwise you're going round circles. So, so guys, like, not everyone here is going to do exactly the same thing as you, Niall, but the big, I suppose the really big message to get from this is that you know a lot more than you think you know, and you're probably capable of a lot more than you realize. That doesn't mean that every single job application is going to recognize that. So sometimes you have to go about it a different way. And, really, for definite, the easiest way to get comfortable with this and to talk directly to engineers rather than to recruiters and HR people is to bypass those processes and just position yourself in industry. And, the rest with certain behaviors will kind of work itself out a lot. There's a lovely message there from Marina, actually, and Marina has already kind of followed in your footsteps by the sound of it. So Marina's been working with Goofy God Comics and asked them if they had an interest to create a gamer quiz. And there's a teacher there. I don't really fully understand this, but there's a teacher there and she might want a quiz site for her students. So there's somebody putting their skills to use. Like, all of the things that will come out of this, and apart from anything else, your experience will come out of it. So when you get to interview stage, you've got loads of things to talk about, and that that sort of approach just blows people away when you do get hiring. So before we finish your ninja skills, we have. I
was just seeing that comment. I would have to comment.
Thanks, Monica, for reminding us. So you're going to give us these hacks.
Yeah. So what I tend to do before I go to an interview is. I think it's pretty standard. You research the company. You know what you're getting in for. Be able to speak about the company a little bit. Okay. Yeah. I know that sounds obvious to some people, but some people, they just kind of thrown themselves at so much that they can't be prepared for the interviews. And this comes back to, like, space out your applications, because if you apply for 3 things and you get 3 interviews in 1 week, you're probably going to fail all 3 of them because you'll be ill prepared for all of them rather than ready for one. So that's why I always say space out, like, even like every week, just send out 1 or 2 applications, especially if you're starting to get responses. Usually you'll start seeing a trend as your CV gets better that your response will be better. I think, like, I'll get my CV links to send over to you after, Jane, and you can put it in. But once you change your CV, you should see drastic improvements in your reply rates. And then you can slow down the applications. The thing I do...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go on. I don't want to...
I was going to say, getting into the interview... Yeah, you're all right. Getting into the interview, what I do is I always have, like... In person, it was different. So, like, how I'd mimic this is by screen sharing. But, like, I tend to have a big letter folder with printouts of all the work I've done. Like, physical printouts. From the diagrams of the architecture to screenshots of things I'm proud of to... like full-on explanations to even drawings and wireframes that I've done. And I have this big thick binder, and I just literally open it up, like, during the interview, because people are curious. When I put a big folder on the front of the thing, they're like, "What's that about?" And I'm saying, "Here's my CV, and here is all my work." And suddenly,
so a beautiful, like, a physical portfolio.
Yeah, so I bring a big letter binder with everything. I splashed out and spent about $50 on a thick binder, and I printed off everything I was working on, screenshots of things with explanations and notes on things written down, so that like during it I can prompt and say, when they ask about an example thing, I was like, I can actually show you when I've done this thing. So when somebody's asking, what's your experience with security? I can say, well, actually look at this architecture I drew, and this is how I stopped this from working. Because you're suddenly making the session a lot more interactive and visual.
Yes.
And they want to see what's in your folder. People are curious. It's like, what's in the box?
What's that? Did you bring cake to this meeting?
Yeah.
Yes. And then also, you know, like what I'm always trying to help people understand as well is that, you know, very often the people who are interviewing you, you know, they're not always adhering to a set schedule. So they will by default, like, keep picking up your CV and going, and tell us about this and tell us about this. But you can control the conversation by what sort of answers you're bringing and how well prepared you are in talking about yourself. But that's a lovely hack, because as soon as you've got these nice visuals, it turns into a room of 3 people or 2 people or whatever it is, having a conversation and explaining to each other, rather than it being this really awkward interview that's very transactional. Okay. That works for you.
The only other thing I'd done after about 20 interviews, because I was getting a bit annoyed and I realized I was nearly had a bad attitude, was I turned it into a game as well of try and make the person laugh that I was interviewing with. So at least it just caught things up a beat, because things are very serious and it's hard to be, you know, yourself. And it's hard to find out whether I'd like the people I'd work with. So I found by, you know, getting across some of my humor was often like, no way, you are out. That is not appropriate for an interview. Get out.
So sometimes it didn't work, but sometimes it did. Yeah,
exactly. And so like after like, about halfway through my interview process, I kind of turned it into a little bit of a game as well, in a sense of just like make somebody laugh, have a good time, enjoy the process, because you only have to get lucky once. Once you have your first job, everything is a lot smoother. The first one is hard. After that, it will be so much easier.
Yeah. After that, you'll have that problem that, you know, in all my life as an agency recruiter, engineers and developers used to just roll their eyes and go, no, I don't use LinkedIn, because all that happens is that I get peppered by recruiters all day long. So this is, you know, this is one of the things that is absolutely ahead of you, but it's, you know, it's really nice to know that, you know, this hurdle is something that everybody experiences at the beginning. And it's, you know, don't think of it as the first thing you have to do. Think of it as like the last thing you have to do before you sort of leave your training behind, I guess. And that's the best way through it. But look, you know, one thing I will say is that certainly this session has certainly helped me understand, you know, I suppose the learning curve that you go through in an interview process, and how we can maybe speed that up, and how a network is something that will definitely educate you along the way, and maybe bypass a whole lot of that. So please, guys, pick.
I don't interview anymore, which is great. You know, I don't have to interview anymore. And if I had to interview, I'd feel uncomfortable, because people know me now. I have a big enough network. I'm referred to people, and I'm turning down opportunities all the time. Yeah. And that's just because I'm active online. People want my brand associated with their brand. And I know, like, I'm talking about me as a person, but like, I am a brand because I produce something.
Yes.
And it's very hard. Like, I always think, like, try and balance real world and business, but there is a lot of overlap that you just have to get used to as a professional. Yeah. But yeah, it is a case of, once you do this and you have your garden, life will be so much easier. So even if you're in your first couple of weeks of Code Institute and you're not even sure if this is the way you're going to go, or if you're not even sure this is the career for you, don't doubt yourself. Give yourself an honest attempt at this and push yourself all in and say, I'm going to do this to the best I can. And I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to write some blog posts. I'm going to share as I'm learning. And people will see you. It's just a matter of time. It compounds over time. Nobody will see you at the start, but come a year's time from now, you will have grown a big network.
100%. And look, I think, your story is just incredible. Like, there's some gorgeous, really lovely feedback for you there coming through in the chat. But your story from, I think, what was it, 6 years ago, if we had you here, you would have been here selling us beer. And now you're the CTO of Spark. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big well done to you. Fair play. And,
Thanks.
and I love that you had navigated it yourself. And I love that, you have such a positive approach to seeing, what you describe as failure and just applying it as learning, because that's really what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, it's not going to be a straight path. I worked very, very hard. Anyone that knows me in my personal life knows that it wasn't like I got lucky and lucky and lucky again. I was working 100-hour weeks all the time to force this to happen. I was making sure this happened. I know that's not acceptable for everyone, but I demanded a lot more of myself, and I really had nothing to lose. I had no responsibility, so it was very easy for me to make that commitment.
Sure.
So, but it just means you do need to make a commitment, and that's why if you get anything from this, it's just to commit to be a networker, commit to be social, and commit to what you're learning. Because if you're constantly doubting yourself, you'll trip up when you fall.
Yeah.
You're
shying
like
away
taking drunken
from it.
steps. Yeah. You'll be too afraid to take the leap when it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're lucky because you guys all have this network to, to get help from and to fall back on and to dip into and to contribute to. So come here, it's 1:59. I don't think anybody wants this webinar to end, but I'm afraid we have to. We have strict rules about these.
No worries.
Yeah.
I'll hopefully come back again, Jane, if they want me to get back again. Because I know I probably could have talked for another hour as well.
Well, we didn't even mention much about Spark, but I think you're going to have a lot of new members at your coding community. Guys will be drinking beer with you and coding on a Friday afternoon by the sounds of it.
Please do bring a beer onto
Bring
LinkedIn.
A beer.
We'll network together. That's how we network.
Cool. Okay, I might be there on Friday too. What time do we commence the beer drinking out?
Usually around 5:30 on a Friday evening.
That's respectable enough. Yeah, I could do
finish things off nicely for the day.
Okay, cool. Well, look at for now, everyone, please, all of those links to the Coder community on Twitter and on YouTube and the discourse as well are all there. And I think we're going to have a follow-up from Niall in the future. But in the meantime, you might send us that link if you wanted to. Your CV one that you recommend, and I'll share it with you.
I threw it into the chat and I'll share it with you afterwards.
Oh, did you? Okay, brilliant. I didn't notice. Okay. Well, look, amazing. Come here, have yourself a super weekend, and we'll talk again really soon. And thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks.
Okay. Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.